I am good. Well, I just told you that my second favorite pen just ran out of ink.
Oh no, what about your first favorite pen?
So, well, it's also out of ink still.
Oh my goodness. Well, I guess
I know.
there you need to either refill them with ink or rethink your
I don't
life.
know
I
if
mean, get
that's
a new
possible. Well,
Welcome. You are entering into a strange dimension. A dimension where narratives from across space and time come together. Narratives that could have, might have, or should have been all exist here in one space. This is CineCasters Ultimate Timeline.
Welcome back to CineCasters. This is the show where we watch a movie and pitch it back to each other to try and make something maybe more coherent or better out of it. Today is a very special episode, and I am Andrew DeYoung, and I'm joined, as always, by, well, not as always, but I'm joined by Alessa, who's most regularly on. And today is a very special episode as we're doing our first CineCasters series, where we're going to watch a specific set of movies, pitch them back to each other, and then as we watch the sequels, we have to keep our old pitches in mind to make an entire coherent story work. Neither Alessa or I have ever done this before, so this is going to be hard because we have to pull on our source material, and we have to pull on our past pitches and try and create a coherent story. So
I'm a little nervous.
I'm also
This is going to be... I imagine we might both have a couple plot holes by the end, but it's fine.
Well, that's the fun part, because I think we have the opportunity here to go back,
Yeah.
and be like, I'm fixing this from my old pitch, right? Because I mean, when you're writing a pitch, you try to always like think, or when you're writing a story, you should also be thinking with the ending in mind and how you're going to get there. And so it becomes difficult. So now we're trying something where neither of us have done anything like this before. Have you read the books?
I've read the books, and I thought I watched the movies, but I actually didn't recognize anything from this movie, and I was like, okay, I guess I haven't.
It's because you've seen like literally any young adult fiction from the last 20 years, which is basically this movie.
Yeah, basically.
So of course we're doing the first in the Divergent series, and then we'll be completing all of the episodes, culminating in a last, fourth, and final episode, which there was no movie for. And so you and I will have to have a chance to like finish or correct anything that we know from the books, because we've both read the books. On the fourth episode, we'll have a chance to like have a culminating ending. So that's really exciting, actually. I think this is why I'm really excited to do this, because it's like this series was never finished.
Yeah.
I mean, the books were, but this series as a movie series was never finished. So that'll give us the opportunity to finish something and make it hopefully better, because I hated the ending from the book.
I actually can't remember the ending from the book.
To be fair, I will give you some credit for this. Not that you don't remember, but that like when you read it, when it was big, like when the book series was big, you were still a young adult.
It was, yeah.
I was an adult.
I was in early high school.
Yeah, you would have been in like grade 8 or grade 9. Mm-hmm. I was in my fourth year of university of my undergrad, right? Like finishing school. So like I was an adult. Well, yeah, maybe not,
I can remember a lot
emotionally.
more of the things that I've read as an adult than I can as like a kid.
I can remember most things that I've read. I have a really good memory that way, but like I remember reading this book I read the whole thing in like a week, the whole series. And I remember like the first book was pretty good, like it had pretty good setup, and I remember just hating them more and more and more, and they got predictable. I don't know, maybe it's because I was too old at that point, but I remember really liking the Hunger Games, and I read them only a year or so before this one, and I remember hating as the books went on, like especially the fourth book. They did something in the fourth book, and I immediately started guessing. Like I was just like, this is what's going to happen, and then this is going to happen, and then they all happened.
Yeah,
like easy.
Sometimes I like when I can guess, but at the same time, it shouldn't be so blatant.
I mean, I like that I can guess because it makes me feel good about myself. Like I'm like that smart or that clever or whatever. But what I don't like is like when you can see it coming. Like not because you guessed it because you're like, oh, I put all the pieces together, but because you're just like, oh, I can see this is where it's going to go. There's a
Yeah.
difference. And I think
Yeah.
it's an important distinction. Yeah.
Yeah.
But enough about
All right.
the book series. It's time to get into your goods and bads. What did you like, and what did you not like?
This movie is a bit of a toss-up for me.
Okay.
I was on the fence for a lot of it. Wow, I accidentally put something in the good side even though it shouldn't be. Anyways. So for goods, I really liked that they kind of put in that like stereotyping from day one was like not a good thing, even though their whole society was based off of it. And I really liked the ending part where like the big fight scene was happening. Not big, but I guess the fight scene was happening with the leader of Janine, thank you. And she's like, oh, so you're not so dauntless after all. And then it was like super cliched, but it was like in my heart, it was like, yes! Because then, Triss was just like, no, I'm Divergent. And I was like, yes.
That was a terrible one-liner, I'm not going to lie.
It was awful,
as far as
but I was
one-liners
here
go, like,
for it.
I'm
It was
Divergent.
awesome.
That's not a good
I saw
one-liner.
it coming. It was fantastic. I loved it.
Okay.
Okay, so then my bads, there was not really any character development in anyone else other than Triss and maybe a little bit of Four. Why is the tattoo artist in everything? She's just there, and then she's a tattoo artist, and then she comes back to administer the final test. Like, okay.
Convenience.
Four was a little, yeah, I guess convenience, but Four was a little creepy until they like actually like clicked towards the end. But like again, he was a little creepy.
Oh yeah,
part of it.
there's I like kept track. I think there's like 4 or 5 times that he touches Triss without consent.
Yeah, and it's just like super weird.
Yeah, I kept track. I was like,
Yeah. And then the in-between part for me kind of comes from the fact that I just finished, my first course of psychology. And obviously I'm not an expert in any of this, but I was really excited to be like, hey, I can kind of see maybe there was a little bit of like foundation on like the big 5 of personality traits for this.
yes, yeah.
Yes, and I was like, okay, cool. I like it. I also don't like that they're making out each one to be so strict
Okay.
into like what each personality would be.
Yeah.
Because there is still some fluidity. Not everyone fits exactly into one category.
Yeah, but have you...
somehow.
Okay, but this is how much of the books do you remember?
Not very much.
Okay, because there's like a quote-unquote twist where they explain why.
Okay.
It's not a very good twist.
Okay.
But they do explain
You'll
why.
have to tell me about it again later because I don't remember it.
Okay.
But then there was also like, I feel like Dauntless as a faction would be experiencing a lot of like, I'm sure you've heard of the term misattribution of arousal.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah?
Yep.
Where, they're doing all these crazy stunts, getting their heart racing, and then they're there with their friends, and all of a sudden they're like, oh man, love you, dude. You're gonna be my boyfriend or something like that. And it's like, I feel like there's a lot of that in Dauntless.
Yeah, yeah. I'm gonna let you
Because
finish.
they're just like, yeah, so basically it's just like, they're doing these things and getting their heart racing, and they just kind of think that, oh, it's because of this person that I'm with instead of, yeah. But anyways, so I don't know. I thought it was really cool because I'm sitting here going, yes, I can see all these pieces of my education coming and fitting into this, but also I don't know if I really like how they are pieced together.
Exactly. This is exactly what we do on CineMasters. We use our education and pretend that we're super smart and then point out the inherent flaws in other people's work because we think we're better than them.
Yeah.
That's not actually what we do. The point is basically to just try and be like, what is your reading? What's your interpretation? Because every interpretation is valid.
Yeah.
And
I
think you're hitting some crazy stuff on the head.
Yeah, so that was just like a quick rundown of all my points that I had for like goods and bads, and I'm sure we could talk more about some of them, but I don't know if I want to.
Okay, what do you have any goods?
Well, I just had like those 2 things where like there's super cheesy one-liner at the end, but then also that like the strong stereotyping is obviously not good. But again, their whole society is built off of it for some reason.
So mine is so when I first started watching this movie, I was like, I don't like this movie. I think this movie gets compared to The Hunger Games a lot, but I think The Hunger Games does everything that it's trying to do better. I believe the actual line that I used when I was complaining about this movie to you, when you were like, and I said, why do we do this to ourselves? And you had said, because then we get to complain about it and record it later. And the exact line that I used on you was, I'm going to get so Marxist up in this bitch. So, I do think that this should be compared to The Hunger Games, because I think it tries to do a lot of the same things, but The Hunger Games does it better in a lot of ways. I'm going to start with goods, just because I think Miles Teller is an amazing actor, and he does a great job making you hate him. Yep. I think Shailene Woodley is also an amazing actor. I just don't think this movie gives her any leeway. There's nothing to do in this movie. Yeah. She's generic female protagonist. Like, I didn't care for her or like dislike her or anything like that. She just is there. I found 4 distinctly unlikable. Yep.
So did I.
Yeah. Most of the characters I actually didn't like, except I thought Will. No, not Will. The one guy who tries to like kill her and then
Al.
Yeah. I was like, oh no, I actually like. There's a story there. Like, I actually find that. But anyway, I did like the sort of like aesthetic ideals between the different factions, like how the Abnegation live in like brutalist architecture, which is what made me think of like the Marxist like ideals. So I think the budget is clearly noticeable in the movie. Like, also somehow Hans Zimmer was involved in the music. Like,
somehow, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know how they got him in this, but this movie does do some really cool things in terms of like how it plays with camera angles and mirrors, especially when they're in the illusory kind of realm. I don't know if that's what you want to call it, but like in the dreamscape. That was
really cool.
Yeah, there's some cool camera
with, like, the
angle
puddles
things.
And stuff.
Yeah, and also like just like how the camera will move around people and then they'll move around each other and like show the way they switch and reflect off of each other. That was really well done. It was cool. What was weird about that is I couldn't tell if the movie was trying to do something with mirrors, because the first time we see Triss is like in the mirror. So I was like, are we trying to like hold up and do something like with imagery and mirrors as like a thematic theme? But it doesn't play out.
I think there was a little bit of a theme there. Maybe something about like how you see yourself.
I guess, but I couldn't, like, that was my problem, is I was like, I'm trying to read into how mirrors work, and it's not landing. Like, yeah, I thought that maybe I'm reading into it too much, but I was like, this isn't landing for me. There's nothing there, and clearly there's something like important about this, like about reflection, or even how like she tries to see through like invisible walls a lot of the time. And I was like, I maybe you could say something about like this class division using the factions and whatnot, but like it wasn't landing. Yeah. So, but for me, the biggest thing that I didn't like about this, I mean, that I kind of did like / didn't like, is the way Beatrice, well, first of all, don't change your name to Triss. That's a terrible name. Beatrice is a way better name than Triss. Like, fucking get your shit together.
I agree.
The biggest issue that I have with this is the way that the movie dramatizes and romanticizes the Dauntless. And then the way that they're like treated when they're in the Dauntless. So they're supposed to be the military of this city, of this, but the way it is like I'm like, where are the adults? Like, they're just a bunch of horny teenagers. Like, where are the adults?
I had that question too, I'm glad you said it, because I forgot to write it down.
And they're all like unruly and like, oh, we're the cool kids. Like, it feels more like I'm watching them try to be like the Lost Boys more than like an actual military. Yeah. And that was so aggravating, because I was like, no military would treat or train its recruits this way. It's not a good thing to do, which sucks even more, because the ideas behind this movie were a lot about like conformity and uniformity. And so when you're trying to have conformity and uniformity, but you let your military have like get tattoos and like party all night, and it looks like everything that they have is like a rave and in neon and shit, and I'm like, the aesthetics don't match what you're doing, because out of anything, if you're trying to have like a certain amount of conformity and uniformity in your city state, the place where that would be the most rigid would be in your military.
Yeah.
But it gets romanticized.
Yep.
And I tried to fix this in my pitch a little bit, because I do think it sort of works to the movie's advantage, but like once it's never made clear that this is like Beatrice's romanticization of the Dauntless, because at later on we do see like when her mom dies, that's a very powerful scene. I did think that was really well done. And I do think Shailene Woodley sold that scene. If it is a bit over the top, like she sold it. I was like, okay, like this is terrible. She doesn't do that for her dad, so clearly fuck him, but she does it with her mom.
Well, it's because she had a stronger connection with her mom because she's dauntless. Oh.
But like, no, fuck you. No, my point here is that like this romanticization comes crashing down on Beatrice, but it doesn't feel that way. The movie doesn't frame it that way. No. The romanticization of the Dauntless isn't through Beatrice's point of view. It's literally how they're portrayed in the movie. And this is hugely problematic, because that's, first of all, again, like as I said, that's not how you deal with a military, but also like nobody wants, like, I don't know, maybe it's because I'm older now, but like when I look at the military, I don't go, yeah, I want to do that. I want to sign up to kill people and potentially have those I love be killed. Like, that's not the point of a military. You sign up for the military, and again, I'm not a militaristic person. I have no aspirations for this, but you sign up because you believe in something and you want to protect those ideals. That's the real, hopefully the real reason people sign up for the military. That's not the reason Triss chooses.
Yeah. To me, Dauntless and abnegation should be like hand in hand, because they are both doing something for the service of others without thinking of themselves.
Yeah.
Right? So abnegation, they're making sure that everyone gets food, even if it means that they don't get that much.
Yeah.
And for Dauntless, they're supposed to be protecting people no matter what happens to them.
Yeah.
So it's like this weird, like, she went to basically what is just a more like active faction, I guess. But it's like basically the same thing.
Yeah. It's supposed to be like, oh, we're the adventurous, rebellious. Like, here you can think about yourself and get horny and get tattoos.
But you're not supposed to be thinking of yourself. You're supposed to be thinking of keeping the peace and keeping everyone safe.
Exactly. And so this kind of romanticization of a military unit. So the way that I viewed society was, instead of like personality wise, was like the function of the state. Right?
Yes.
Because I'm coming at it from a Marxist point of view. So the function of the state. So you have your legal system, that's Candor, right? Which practices jurisprudence and like morality. That's your legal system. You have your scholars and your scientists, research, engineers, and trades workers. That's erudite.
Yep.
Right? Then you have abnegation, which is your government socialist arm, right? Which is trying to do, distribution of resources. Amity, which is your farmers, right? Which farmers and livestock and stuff like that. And then you have your Dauntless, which is your military wing, right? So the idea is, like, in all of those things, you have what the value is to the state, the 5 branches of like government, right? You could reduce them down to 4 or whatever. But the point is in here there was 5 branches of state. And I don't know, for a lot of the times it felt like you were talking about, like it was sort of, we were trying to put people into personality types, as opposed to the way that I was looking at it, which was like, no, these are literally your branches of government, your branches of how the state works. To me, it was less about personality, and it was more about like, what's the function of each role in society according to like a almost communist or Marxist point of view, right? What is the function of your role in
and
society?
how do you want to contribute to that, or how would you best be able to contribute to that? Right?
So like the aptitude
rather than
test
like
becomes,
what personality makes you fit in which section.
The aptitude test becomes less about like what your personality says about you, and more about like what your function, how you can best contribute to society. What is your value to the state, right?
Yeah.
And so, like, when we talk about the Dauntless that way, it's like, okay, then you have to be a military, like, not a bunch of rabble-rousing, horny teenagers, right? Yep. And I know that in later movies, we're probably going to see more of the other branches, the other factions, But like, I don't know, it seemed very strange to me. There's one point in time where Janine says like every faction or the state, the city is built up of like each cell, which is each of you, which is part of the faction, and that has to all function appropriately. And I was like, this reminds me of a particular like speech slash soliloquy from Coriolanus, where they talk about like how even though we're the head, like the head needs the brain and the stomach to like work. It's often emblematic of how fascist regimes or dictatorships or oligarchies will like say things about how they need to control or how everyone has their place. And I don't know, to me it was like I can see these themes in there and that's really cool, but the movie doesn't follow through with them, and neither and
I wish,
to my recollection, neither does the book.
I wish that they were a little bit like stronger and fit together a bit better. But I feel like also if they were to fit together a bit more, we wouldn't see quite the same amount of conflict that we do in the movie.
Oh no. See, I can fix that too. I did it in my pitch.
You did? Okay.
But because I think I can fix that. I tried to stay away. Anyway, we'll get back into that. But there's two things that really ticked me off in terms of or one thing really that ticked me off in terms of plot hole, which is when Beatrice like gets cut.
Yep.
So there's a point in time where they're actually like, oh, we made it in and you didn't. You got cut. You're below the line.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh no. And then she literally just is like, I guess I'm going to show up with everyone else. And gets on the train and there's no consequences. Like,
yeah. The guy was just like, very well.
Yeah,
I
guess you could be here. And I was like, I feel like you could have done something there with being like, where she was like, well, no, Dauntless never gives up and I want to be a Dauntless. And I'd be like, that thematically would have worked into what she's trying to achieve.
Yes.
But also, Beatrice is special. That's what this movie boils down to.
Yep.
And I know why Beatrice is special because I remember this from the book, but it pisses me off because, and I'll use Katniss Everdeen from the Hunger Games because it often gets compared, so let's not beat around the bush. Katniss isn't special. In fact, Katniss isn't really likable. She says that herself, right? Katniss in herself isn't what makes her special. What makes her special is the skills and behavior and how she uses that to her advantage. Katniss is inherently selfish. There's only one person in the whole world that Katniss cares about more than herself, and that's her sister. And that's the driving force of the show. Slowly that becomes Peeta. But we can see even Katniss kind of wrestles with that, right? She's inherently selfish. She's not likable. And we get the whole story from her perspective, which works in her favor. But it's the skills and whatnot that she has and her behavior that makes her unique amongst her peers in the Hunger Games. In this, because Beatrice is divergent, she is inherently special. When she doesn't make it into the Dauntless and is apparently supposed to become factionless, she just doesn't because she's special.
Yep.
Beatrice isn't a good role model because she doesn't do anything really that sets her apart from anyone else other than the fact that she's divergent. She's special. She's different. I know why she's divergent. I don't know if you remember, but I know why. But it's basically saying like you either are special or you're not. And I don't like that at all.
I don't like that either.
Yeah. You either are divergent or you're not.
Yeah.
And I tried to fix that as well. So, yeah,
I think they should just come up with a sixth faction and just call them like the creatives and throw all the divergent people there.
All the creatives.
They don't have any artists on any of the factions, which is like,
because art in like traditional Marxist society, there's a reason that like artists don't fit into capitalism or communism or socialism or like more so socialism. But as an artist, you don't really contribute anything to the state.
I know.
Like art, and like don't get me wrong, art is super valuable. That's why we're here. That's why we literally run CineMasters. Art is like, they say, food for the soul is often gets thrown around. Music or sculpture or dance or whatever. This is a way for people to be creative and then for audiences to bask in that creation. Whether you like it or not is never the point, right? The point is to experience art, and that's really important on an individual basis. But on a community, government, state basis, art has no value, like in that kind of way. And by that I mean like when you're doing art, you are not contributing to society. You're contributing to the individual. When you do art, that time could be spent farming or doing legal stuff or training or right. So from a capitalist kind of point of view, art has no value, and that's why a lot of artists are like, all I want to do is be an artist, but I can't make any money off of it. It's because your art has no value. The only way your art has value is if other people care about it, and generally speaking, unless you force them to, people don't care about your art. That's the hard part about being a musician. When we first put out the album The Universe Is Calling, people didn't care, and it's not because the art was bad, it's because people don't care. You have to make them care, and there's a certain amount of subterfuge almost in making people care about art. It's kind of anti-capitalist. I'm asking you to spend money on something that doesn't really help your life in any way except for like your mental and emotional capacity, right? Which we often find hard to quantify or to give value to in our society, because it's the same reason, I'm going off on a tangent here, but it's the same reason that mental health often gets cut out to the wayside. I'm unwell, but when you're sick, it's like literally, or you have a broken limb, it's like literally, no, that's not working, that's not functioning the way it should. But when you're when you're sick with mental health, it's hard to go, well, your brain's not functioning the way it should. We're getting over that kind of stigma now, but it's often been harder to say that. Same with art. How do we put a value, an actual non-monetary value on appreciating art? It's difficult to do. And that's why
it's very tough.
When you bring up, it's a good point, when you bring up like art, it's like, well, that's something you do in your free time.
But if you're always serving your faction, you got no free time.
Well, I'm assuming they must have some free time. It's hard. I remember in the book, there's a lot more build up before the test. They kind of just launched Beatrice right in. But I remember there being like a bit more of like, what the heck is actually going on? Here we sort of get this like prologue of her narrating. I don't know.
It was okay. The prologue.
The whole movie was just, it's okay. I see the appeal. I really do. And a lot of these ideas, I can be like, oh my god, this is kind of just Animal Farm in a lot of ways. It has that same like feel. Like Erudite wants to take over from Abnegation, and in order to do so, they need to mobilize the proletariat against. In 1984, Orwell talks about how the middle class uses the lower class to revolt against the upper class. And what winds up happening is, I'm using my fingers, but what winds up happening is that by using the proletariat, the middle class overthrows the upper class, and they switch. So now the upper class has become the middle class, and the middle class has become the upper class. Even though the proletariat was the tool, the means by which the overthrowing happened, they're still always downtrodden. They're always the proletariat, or the plebeians, right? So essentially the same thing happens here. The Erudite are like, we need an army to overthrow the Abnegation, and so they use the Dauntless.
And the Dauntless are just tools.
The Dauntless are just tools, which always happens. If you've ever seen any coup d'etat, right? The military is always involved, and a military is often usually the ones who are performing the coup d'etat. A general or something gets too big for his britches and decides to overthrow the government because they can. They have the military on their side. They have that force of power. I think very much this movie has those kinds of ideals in it, but it doesn't lean heavily into them. There is a point in time where Beatrice manages to like overcome the serum through the power of love and friendship. I literally wrote in my notes when she's fighting 4, I think. I was like, oh, the power of love and friendship is what's going to save her. And then I wrote in brackets, cue anime music.
Yep.
And I also didn't like this, that I know that she saves 4 from the serum, but I think it's like 3 or 4 times that 4 comes to her aid and saves her.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know, we're trying to show that Beatrice is like this badass female protagonist, and she doesn't really do much for herself. I mean, she makes choices, and she affects the plot, I'm not saying that. I'm just saying whenever she gets in trouble, it often feels like 4 is there to bail her out.
Yeah.
And that's disappointing.
Yeah.
Also, their romance sucks, even in the book.
I think I fixed their romance and the 4 is always there to save her thing with my pitch. I tried to
fix that too. Yeah. Yeah.
That was all that I really fixed. There were a couple little things that I tweaked, but that was basically it.
I did laugh out loud once. I need to point this out. When Beatrice like punches Kate Winslet, that's Janine, punches Janine in the face, I was like, I laughed out loud because the only thing I thought of, because it's Kate Winslet, right? The only thing I thought of was like, yeah, take that, Kate Winslet. That punch to the face, that's for not making room on the door when Jack was sinking on the Titanic.
Oh my god.
That's for not making room on the door.
That's perfect.
Yeah, this movie was long. It wasn't bad. I see the appeal. I don't know. I wanted more from it. I wanted it to think harder about what it was setting up in terms of like you said, are we doing personality? Are we doing psych tests? Because I also think there's another question worth asking, which is like, what are the effects of this kind of, particularly in Dauntless, what are the effects of this kind of like stress on the brain, like psychologically, when we're putting them through those kinds of serum tests and whatnot, that kind of stress and strain can have long lasting, fucked up effects.
And the physical one where like the only way for a duel to end is by someone getting knocked out. Like how many concussions do these people have?
But more so than that, also, the only way that you get to solidify your place in Dauntless is by actively hurting the people who are around you and might be your friends. Now, we only ever see Beatrice fight against that one other young lady and with Peter, Miles Teller's character. So there's always some kind of like antagonism between them. But like, what if she was told, you have to kick the shit out of Christina, or she has to kick the shit out of you, right? Like that kind of. And also, you don't train a military that way.
No. Ugh. Well, I mean, you could tell that there was a lot of tension between like 4 and what's his name about doing like training that way.
But also like not just like Eric being an asshole. You get assholes like that in military all the time. That's part of the dark side of that. But just like the fact that even Max, the leader of the Dauntless, would even be like, yeah, we're going to train our military to be cutthroat. No, military is all about teamwork and conformity and working as a unit. You don't want people to have individuality. You don't want them to think that they're better than other people who are on their team. You want them to work together as a team in order to complete a common goal. You don't want personality. Right? Which is, again, feeds back into this idea of conformity and uniformity in the 5 factions of how a state operates in terms of government. I don't know. This is why this movie pisses me off. I'm like, great ideas, terrible follow through.
Awful execution.
Sometimes it feels like to me like there was less of a this author, I can't remember their name. This author wrote something that was like, oh, this is a really neat idea, without thinking about why it was a really neat idea. Right? In terms of, like you said, in terms of personality, like the idea of the 4 humors, that are controlled by phlegm, blood, bile, and poop.
Yes.
So that's what it is. But those are the 4 humors, and that's how like the different parts of personality were controlled, or at least that's how they thought they were controlled, right? And you can do 5. 5 also works, but like 4 is common, 5, whatever. It's just, the different parts of personality. Like that's a really great way to look at this movie. The other way was, the way that I did, which was, this idea of like how governments function in terms of like how they use people as a kind of capital, a kind of commodity, and work. But then I'm sure there are other ways to read into this too. It just feels like this is a really neat idea without thinking about why it was a neat idea.
Yeah.
This feels like a watered down version of 1984, except without all the like terrible human atrocities.
Yes.
So, yeah, I don't know.
I mean, there still are a couple, but
yeah, but it's not the same kind of like human atrocities. Like, I don't know if you've read 1984.
I have.
Yeah, or even Animal Farm. Animal Farm would have been a better way to go about this, because Animal Farm feels like it's for children.
Yeah.
And it feels to me like this is a way to be like, oh, let's tell that same kind of story, but let's do it in a with a main character, and let's have a love story in there, because that's what you do in young adult fiction. There's a couple of books that I've read that are young adult fiction where I'll be like, this is great, except for the romance plot. The romance plot is almost detracting from the story.
Yep. That kind of happened with this one, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like, I just kind of want Beatrice to be her own person and not be named Triss, because it's a terrible name.
Mm-hmm. That's what happened with How to Train Your Dragon for me.
Really?
It's like, why do we need Astrid?
You mean, why do we need Astrid to be a character that is inherently tied to Hiccup?
Yeah.
Because, like, Astrid can still be her own character. She is her own character. But as soon as she gets tied to Hiccup, she becomes less badass, really.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just bad romance plots. Just don't do it, people.
Yeah.
Just stop it.
Don't do it. Don't put a romance plot in your movie simply because or in your book simply because you think you need it.
Yeah.
I read this other book.
I mean, I should not talk because I have a bad romance plot in one of my books.
Okay, but is having a bad romance plot the purpose of the story?
No.
Yeah.
No.
Well, then that's a bit of a problem. Because if you have a bad romance plot that is the purpose, like if you're pointing out the fact that it's a bad romance, that can be hilarious or useful.
No, it's like, it's kind of a background thing.
Oh, okay. I read this.
It's more of like an extremely subtle thing that happens over like 3 books.
Oh, okay.
Like,
yeah, see, that's
it's not
fine.
like,
That's fine.
bam, we're awkward and now we're in love,
So in
and
the book,
now we're forever together.
in the actual book, when Beatrice jumps into the net at the like part of the initiation to be part of Dauntless, when she jumps into the net, the way that the like chapter works, where she like gets pulled off the net by 4, is like it reads like something almost out of a Harlequin romance. So she's like, the world stopped and I was only looking at him, and I was like, are you fucking kidding me?
Awful.
Yeah. And like, she never outright says that she's in love with him, but she's like, oh, he was like so like such a good looking, and you're just like, I don't know. I'm not I don't know, how old is she? 16? I'm not a 16-year-old girl who's ever fallen in love. So I don't know. Maybe that's what it's like the first time you ever fall in love, if you're a 16-year-old girl or whatever. But as a 28-year-old dude who has, you know, been in functioning good relationships, at least from my point of view, in the past, it's never been like that.
I don't think it's ever been like that for me too. Maybe I'm doing it wrong.
Yeah. I don't know. I read this really good series called Frostblood. The Frostblood series. It was 3 books, a trilogy. Highly recommend. The only part that always pissed me off was that there was this like love triangle, and it felt forced. I was like, dude, I don't care about the love triangle. Like, all I want to see is these, you know, these badass characters shoot fire and ice at each other. Like, it's very much like Avatar: The Last Airbender. I was like, I just want to see these people like shoot fire and ice at each other, and just like, this is such an awesome like world and idea with its own backstory and lore. You'll love the world building. You should definitely read it. And
I just wrote it down.
But the love story, I was like, this is trite. I hate it.
Yeah.
Also, the ending was way too Deus Ex Machina. Like, literally Deus Ex Machina in the most literal sense.
Good to know.
Anyway, I'm all riled up and angry at this movie. Like, Marxism, goddammit, capitalism, communism, the state.
One last point about like the personality thing, though. Okay, like, what was I about to say? Oh my god. Okay, so personality tests and like figuring out what job you're gonna get from personality tests, I'm gonna say it's bogus.
Oh, it's all bogus.
It's super bogus. There are some places where it is like helpful, kind of. Like, psychologists do actually, like, there are some psychologists who get hired by companies to like do psych tests on people. Right?
Yeah, but a psych test is not the same as like an aptitude test. And a personality test is not the same as an aptitude test.
But they still do look at your personality for some things.
Like, yeah, but like a personality test, like if you're doing like the Myers-Briggs, or if you're doing the colors, or if you're doing the Enneagram, like these are all different personality tests, and they can be useful for understanding yourself and how you might get along with other kinds of people.
Yes.
In teams and stuff like that. But an aptitude test is...
Yeah, it's different. But personality tests defining an entire society will not work.
I don't know, man. It's never been done. Maybe it would be fun to try.
I really don't think it would work, especially because you are putting like-minded people together,
which is a bad idea.
which is a bad idea unless it's like the super like outgoing, sure, let's, you know, do what you want to do, but then it's also like it's not a good idea.
Yeah. You know, when they say it takes all kinds, it literally takes all kinds.
Yeah. Well, and people, depending on, you know, what personality they come out with from those tests, sometimes function in like two people with different outcomes from a test will function very differently in the same type of job for different reasons, and they might thrive at the same level, again, for different reasons. So it's like, why are we focusing only on like, oh, the Dauntless don't have that many fears, or they're a little reckless, so obviously they're going to be like amazing as,
I feel like just because you're
peacekeepers or
reckless would
whatever.
make you a terrible soldier.
Yeah.
I mean, again, I don't know that much about soldiering, but I often feel like, isn't the idea supposed to be to like protect, not be reckless?
Yeah. I don't know.
I don't know. I always felt
So-
like wisdom was the proper amount of like bravery mixed with cautiousness, or
Yes.
stupidity mixed with cautiousness.
Yes. But then they also want people who are wise or intellectual, which are, you know, two different things, to be working in like scholarly positions instead, because they're smart and can put these, you know, things together. And
I also did want to say, like, one of the things that I thought was interesting about this was like the oversimplification of the factions.
Yeah.
Like,
Well, and that's where the stereotyping really came in, I think.
the
Because
oversimplification.
even
so,
if
like,
you do look at the big 5 personality things, like they are simplifications of other personality traits kind of rolled into one. So you can have a lot of variation within each trait, but they're just using that trait as like a category for you, even though, yes, there is a lot of variation. But we didn't really see a whole lot of that.
But not even just in personality. Like, of course you're correct, but not even just in personality, but like the way erudite was portrayed was like the focus was on like this scholarship and stuff like that. But what about like the scholarship all seemed to be data driven or science driven, right? Like, oh, we're gonna do stuff with cognitive, or like, but like, I don't know, what about the scholars who are interested in literally any other kind of scholarship, not just science or food or data driven scholarship, but like people like myself? I consider myself a scholar, right? If I had to be in a faction, it would probably be erudite.
Yep.
But my kind of scholarship is done based around music, which is an art form, and philosophy, which is like its own kind of bullshit. But that's still
well,
scholarship.
and you also
It's
have
just
like
not,
history in that too, right?
Yeah, I don't know. Would what I do because like jurisprudence is a kind of philosophy. Would I belong in Candor then?
I don't know.
Like, see,
maybe you're Divergent.
Yeah, I mean,
where would I fit in? I'm like
you're a
artist to
Hufflepuff.
the core. Like, what?
You're a Hufflepuff.
I'm a Hufflepuff. No, I'm a Ravenclaw. Thank you very much.
My bad. So then Ravenclaw
Yeah.
is erudite. Like, it's all the same kind of bullshit.
Yeah.
This is what I was talking about when I was talking about the 4 humors. Like, I'm a Slytherin.
And yet, I don't know. You don't seem like that much of a Slytherin. Just like chatting, but sometimes I can see it, I guess.
Anyway, I could go down into a rabbit hole about why Slytherin's the best, but it doesn't matter. No, none of them are the best. The point is it's not where we're placed, it's what we choose, right? That's what Dumbledore and the Sorting Hat would say. Anyway.
Well, and that's also what the choosing ceremony was about.
Yeah.
It's like not just what is best for your faction or for your family, but also for you.
Yeah, sort of. I think that anyway,
Kind
I
of.
have ways to fix that too.
And what's best for the society.
Yeah. Do you want to go first, or would you like me to go first for pitches?
I'll go first.
Okay. Hit me
Again,
up.
because I ended mine in a weird spot, so I'll see.
Oh,
we'll see
mine
how this
ends
goes.
in a weird spot too, but go for it.
Okay, so basically, the only big thing that I actually changed was that 4 is actually going to be a lady.
Yeah.
And
I already love this.
Awesome. And I just changed a couple like small plot things. So
she's a lady.
bear with me while I read through this because I actually wrote down quite a bit.
Cool.
Okay, so it basically starts the same. But leading up to the choosing ceremony, we actually maybe get to see some like insights into each of the 5 factions because there's really not much of that. Like, it's like, oh, Candor is this and like Dauntless is this and blah blah, and it's just like, okay, well, we don't actually see that much about what they do. We just see like a stereotype.
That does come out in the later books and movies, as I recall.
Yeah. I think I do remember that, but it's also just right in that start. I'm like, I need more information. Give me more information.
You want more world building. That's just you.
Always. So, yeah. So we also see that Triss is trying her best to be like a good member of Abnegation, but it's also, you can see it clearly that that's not what she wants to do with her life. She gets very drained very quickly from doing all of this work. And then when she goes to do the test, they actually, like, the results come out the same. I don't know how I would have changed the simulation, but I would have, but I just don't know how. It was not great.
Yeah.
I didn't understand any of the imagery in it. It was weird. So anyways, fast forward to the choosing ceremony. I really liked the bowls and the symbolism in that, like the fact that like it was the hot coals for Dauntless and the rocks for Abnegation, the water for
Erudite,
and like it was cool. I liked that.
I think it was grain for Amity, and I don't remember what Candor was.
Yeah, I can't remember. I don't think we actually saw it.
Oh, I'm trying to go from the book. It's been a couple years.
But yeah, so all of the choices stay the same. I'm not sure if I want Triss to be able to say goodbye to her family or not. I think they should have another night together before they actually like split, just so there's a little bit more of like emotions. Because all of a sudden it's just like, okay, bye, off to Dauntless. I don't even bring any of my stuff with me.
I do have to say I didn't like the choosing ceremony. I mean, it was fine. My point there was just, is nobody gonna clean the knife? Because that's a really, really good way.
Oh no, there was a guy that went up there and cleaned the knife.
Oh, I never saw the guy clean the knife.
Him?
No. Because I was like, you're just gonna keep that knife there? Because like that is a breeding ground for like different kinds of diseases.
Yeah, it was not. Yeah, no, don't worry. There was someone there cleaning the knife.
Okay,
every time someone walked away, he went up and
I must have missed that.
Yeah. Anyways, so the next morning, everyone goes off to to actually join the initiates for each group. So it's another like combining everyone together, and I just really wanted her to have a really emotional night with her parents, because that just seemed right to me, because not only is she leaving, but so is Caleb.
Yeah.
And it was like, that's a lot of emotion right there for her parents. And speaking as someone who is, and yourself as well, who have left our parents for like schooling for a short period of time, it's like, it's still like, even knowing that you're going to come back, it's still a little emotional, right?
I remember the first time I left, that was hard.
It was really hard when I was first dropped off in Ottawa, and I was just like standing at the front door of the dorms and watching my parents drive away, and I was like, okay, now what?
Yeah.
Right? And so having that, it would be a lot more relatable, I think, for most audiences to see Triss having that sort of moment. Anyways, so they still do the same thing, running up the train tracks and catching the train and doing the leap of faith from Assassin's Creed, but not as cool. And then so at the bottom of the leap of faith, I'm calling it that because I don't know what else to call it, all of the leaders for Dauntless are there. So like anyone in some sort of a higher position of power, they're all waiting there to welcome their initiates. And the leader, we actually get to see him. He gives a speech and he's just like, welcome, you're gonna be great, like, we're here to keep the peace. And he like goes on about Dauntless's core attributes. I don't know. And then I forgot to mention the most important part was that the three leaders who are going to be taking the initiates and training them are the ones helping them off the thing. So there's like a woman who is slightly older than most of the initiates, and then two men who are slightly older than that woman. So yeah, they have the speech, and then so the not Dauntless born are going to go with 4, who is the woman who just helped Triss off of the net. And everyone else is going to split off into 2 groups and go with the other 2 leaders. The other 2 groups are going to be getting different types of training because they are Dauntless born, so they have Dauntless education already. They know how to build muscle, they know how to like fight a little bit. Like now it comes their tactics training and group training and stuff like that. So they get their own leaderboard for stuff like that, but they also don't have to worry as much about getting kicked off unless they're like the top or like the bottom like 10% or something like that. Whereas the not Dauntless board is like the bottom 50% get cut, which is like crazy. But I just wanted this to be so like there's always a set high percentage of Dauntless born in the faction, which is something that you don't normally see in any of the other factions. They're like, oh yeah, we welcome you as long as you want to do whatever you need to do. Whereas Dauntless is like, nah, if you were trained here, you're probably going to be great. And if you're not, like, good luck. Yeah. So throughout like the training, there's a lot of like the other two leaders for the other two groups constantly come by and like give For a hard time about her group. And like, she's got a really hard job. There's a lot of people who have never learned how to like do anything with their muscles before. Like climbing and like not even just fighting, but just like just dealing with
physical stress.
Like physical stress, yeah. And so that's what she has to focus on for the first bit is like, here's the like, you know, we get to see like a little bit of maybe a kinesiology lesson and like, here's all your muscles, here's like how you want them to grow.
No man, that's too erudite. You can't teach people things.
Well, maybe they have an erudite come in and show them.
Nope,
I don't know.
But they can't learn it. That's too erudite.
Yeah. So anyways, you know, just training them the important stuff on how to be a good Dauntless before actually moving on to like training for like Dauntless training. Yeah. So, again, they're just giving For a hard time because they're like, haha, your initiates suck. And then, so as all of this is going on, people are like, man, For is so mean, but she's also got mean people around her, so it sucks, I guess. But then Triss is just like, oh, but I feel bad for her because she's trying really hard and not all of us are great. Clearly, like, she's one of the ones who are not that great.
Super not that great. And so she actually, like, Triss actually goes up to For a couple times throughout, like, the training and is just like, hey, you know, I just saw these people are really dumb and, you know, I'm trying really hard. I want to get better so that you don't have to deal with those people anymore. And then For is like, you gotta stop acting like a stiff, like you're Dauntless now. Don't think about me, think about yourself. You need to, you know, if you want to be Dauntless, you have to get above that line. And Triss is like, oh yeah, I guess I just, you know, old habits don't... She's from Wisconsin now.
Oh my god. Old habits die hard, right? And then For will say something about like learning how to lose yourself in this sort of the same way that Triss's mom did when she was talking about like how to be a good member of abnegation. And then so Triss starts moving up the ranks because she's doing her extra training sessions and, you know, same kind of thing that happened with the movie. And then they get the first cut. Triss just barely makes it above the line. She's in like top 49%. Like, she's rough shape still. And then they move on to the second phase of training. And again, they get to learn first how to deal with your fears. Figure out some way that you can actually fight it head on to face your fears.
Instead of just throwing them in, yeah.
Instead of just throwing them in, because that really bothered me. Because I was like, okay, first of all, if I had to go in there, first of all, it'd just be a room of butterflies. I cannot deal with that. My heart would probably stop, and I would just die where I was. Butterflies, yeah.
Really?
Horrifying. And I know why. I don't want to talk about it.
Okay. All right. We'll
talk about it another time. Yeah. But it's fine. I know why. But anyways. And so, like, they're like, yeah, here's ways that you can figure out how to deal with your fears. And also, side note, there was one character from the books that was afraid of moths, right?
I don't remember.
You don't remember? I think I remember that because I was like, oh, one of my people. Anyways. Where am I? Yeah, so none of those things work for Triss because she's just like, it's not real, you know? I just break the system. And then Four takes notice, is like, whoa, you can't be doing that. And Triss is like, why? And Four is like, well, you know, you're not facing your fears. You have to face your fears to be a Dauntless. And then Triss is like, oh, this is weird. Is she on to me? Is Four on to me? I don't know.
Or is she into me?
You will find out. So they get a couple times to actually like work through and face your fears, and Four is there basically throughout it because again she's the main person training this group. And around the last time, or like maybe there's like 2 more times left, I don't know. Four is just like, what were your results in the test, the aptitude test or whatever it is. And they just have this really uncomfortable conversation where, you know, kind of similar to what happened, but it ends up creating a lot of tension between them. And I feel like there wasn't that much tension shown in the original movie, but I don't know. Again, I'm not sure how I would do it, but it needs to happen. They need to be very tense. So she's like, oh, well, I'm worried about being figured out. So who am I going to find? The person who administered my test, because she clearly knows so much about these people. So she actually hasn't seen her before. She doesn't know where she is. She just kind of asks around. She's like, she's a testing lady. I just want to go and talk to her. And then they end up going and visiting, and the lady's just like, okay, well, first of all, you shouldn't be in Dauntless. I told you, like, abnegation's the safest spot for you. Why did you come here? But then Triss was like, it didn't feel right.
I love how you make Triss out to be like a Muppet. Like, she sounds like, it didn't feel right. Like, I'm loving this. I'm just imagining, like, a puppet version of Shailene Woodley. Carry on.
I'm glad. So then we find out about the lady's brother, who was also Divergent. And the lady is just like, okay, you need to be really careful, and you need to come up with a plan because I'm administering your final test. And there's going to be like every single one of the leaders from Dauntless and representatives from every other faction. Because that's tradition in every faction, to make sure that all of the initiates actually like are real, like legit, you know? So Triss is like, yo, shit, I gotta figure this out. And she heads back to her room to lay down and do some thinking. But then on her way there, she sees Four talking with some of the other Dauntless. And she's just like, oh, I'm gonna take a side route. And then she goes. And little does she know, Four is just like, oh, hey, I just saw, you know, I need to go talk to her to like tell her that I'm not going to hand her over to the authorities because she, you know, seems worried about that. But anyways, that's a side note. So Triss is going and sees her friends in the dorm room chatting and being a little bit intimate, and she's just like, I am not in the mindset to be a part of this right now. I'm gonna leave. So she ends up going for a walk, and that's where she gets jumped. Mm-hmm. And then she sees that it's her third friend. The same sort of thing plays out. Four is there because she was trying to like track Triss down. Mm-hmm. To have this conversation
instead of
with
just
her.
showing up.
Instead of just showing up, like there's an actual reason for it. And then they actually go to the authorities and they're like, Triss got attacked. And so they're like, all right, cool. Who was a part of the attack? And Triss doesn't actually tell them that she knows. Because she's just like, she's thinking about it. She's like, this person is my friend, but like it was just a really bad act of judgment, or she's like in shock or something like that. But she doesn't feel comfortable going back to the big bedroom with everyone else because she knows that her friend will be there, and she's like, I can't deal with that right now. So Four is like, oh, just come, you know, you can stay with me for the night and we'll figure out something in the morning, or like figure out if we can find these people. No. So on their way to Four's room, Al, the friend that tried to kill her, stops them, and Four is just aggressively like, leave her alone, dude. She doesn't want to talk to you right now. And Triss is actually just like, you know, I'm really hurt. I can't forgive you. Like, leave me alone. Figure your life out. And then in the morning, they find out that he jumped or was pushed into the pit because Triss didn't know who the other 2 people were. Right? But Al did. So they're thinking that he was pushed. But anyways, so this is the morning of the big test, the big final test, and Triss is like freaking out, obviously. So they have a little bit of time, and 4 is just like, come hang out with me. I'll keep you calmed down. Like, I'll work you through this, and then once you're done your test, you can stress about everything everything else after. So they chat, and then 4 is like, I'm not going to turn you over to the authorities as long as you promise not to turn me over to the authorities. And then they have this conversation about like, yeah, divergence. Woohoo. And then 4 is like, I have faith in you. You're going to pass this test. Like, you're divergent, and so am I. And like, I did it, so you can do it. And, become like the Dauntless. And then the lose yourself thing comes back up, and 4 is just like, oh, it's a bit of a divergent saying. I heard it from another divergent when I was figuring out who I was. And then they said, like, the idea of losing yourself is foreign to people who aren't divergent because they already have a strong sense of who they are. And she's like, oh, whoa, maybe my mom's divergent.
Ooh,
and then,
good theming.
Yeah, and then the signal hits for the initiates to go, so they go together, and then 4 gets situated with the other leaders. All the other initiates are also lined up in this massive room, and they get to see their peers' fears. And so the big kahuna guys comes up, and he's just like, yeah, I thank you. And he's just like, all right, we stand here today to, help everyone through their fears as peers, and blah blah blah, and really like cheesy stuff, even though obviously it doesn't work out that way because Dauntless are crazy.
Yep.
So they start by they go by rank. So they start with like the highest ranked people, and then Triss is actually somewhere in the middle now, so we get to see like, the guy who's afraid of moths faces his fear of moths at one point, and then it's her turn, so she goes up and she's, does her thing. Her fears are basically the same as in the original, but instead of being scared that 4 is going to take advantage of her, Triss is worried that, like, 4 is going to be disgusted with her, because this is, like, where the idea of, like, maybe she has a crush on 4 actually comes out.
But homosexuality is, like, frowned upon?
Yeah, because we don't really see any of that.
Oh, I like that idea where she's like into 4, but she's afraid that she'll be rejected by 4, and that she'll be rejected by others for her homosexuality.
Yeah, so like that comes out in that fear, and then at the same time we get to see 4 just kind of being like, oh my god, what just happened? And then all of her peers, her fellow leaders, are just like, woo, and it's just like really weird for 4, and she's just like, this is really uncomfortable. But I also don't know how to feel about it all, because maybe I have feelings for her too. I don't know yet.
So good.
And so Triss passes the test, and then they go and get their tracking device injection, which is also serum, the obedience serum. And then they head to the cafeteria for celebration. They party the night away and then go to bed. And then this is, again, their last night in their dorms before they all get split off into the other sections of Dauntless and where they're going to go to, like, do their jobs. And then the movie ends with Triss waking up to the others getting ready. And she joins them trying to fit in, and then like the very last thing that we see is just like that random divergent just like walking around being like, hey, what's going on, and then
they're like, oh, it must be divergent, and they just shoot him. Yeah well, that's a good ending there. I like that ending.
It's like, yeah.
No, I like that ending because it's
all
like
sorts of
open,
all sorts of open things for like the next movie. And so like 4 and Triss possibly being a thing, and like Triss's emotions and sexuality and all that coming into play, and then also like the fact that now everyone is like obedient, and we don't know why. I guess we know why. We can figure out now why it's a problem to have divergence just kind of mixed in with people that are supposed to be controlled. And then also, we haven't heard anything about her parents. We don't know where this is going, because she hasn't actually heard any rumors about what's going on with Abnegation and the other faction.
Which other one?
the smart one.
Erudite.
Erudite, thank you.
Which is also
there's, like,
coincidentally a background in D&D.
Really?
Yep.
Good to know. And so, like, I wanted to leave it open, but I also wanted there to be, like, a good, solid, like, cliffhanger.
I always pronounced it erudite, but whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah, no,
Cool.
that's great.
That's
I
my
love
pitch.
that. I love how you've, like, tied in sort of, like, this idea of like, non-conformity in terms of, like, sexuality could also be a factor, and not necessarily, like, to do with divergence, but just, like, a factor. Mm-hmm. Oh, I like that. I like the cliffhanger. Like, there's a bunch of unexplained things. Ooh, that's good. Mm-hmm. It's really good.
I'm really proud of myself for this one.
Yeah, it's good. Really good. Oh,
all right,
man, I'm
let's hear
excited to see what
yours.
you come up with next. The only problem is that you'll have to
know.
make up the end part of this movie to get into
I
the next
know.
movie, so that might be difficult.
I know. Yeah.
Yeah. All right, here we go. Ready?
Yep.
Okay, so my movie starts out the same way, with Beatrice explaining how society works. So the city is built on the foundations of the 5 factions, the 5 branches of the city. So the erudite, who are the scholars and scientists, trade workers, and engineers who make the infrastructure and do the research. The Candor, who are the legal system, dealing with jurisprudence, morals, public policy, trials, stuff like that. The Amity, who is the largest group and tend to crops, livestock, food production, and all kinds of work, including factory and production. The Dauntless, who are the military and the soldiers, and the Abnegation, who function as, like, the government responsible for charity, organization, and distribution of goods. Mm-hmm. So the idea is that all of the factions are balanced and keep each other in check and function in a way that keeps every member doing something that provides for every other member. So there's no concept of money.
Yep.
So this is all explained as Triss is lining up to with her faction to undergo the testing, which will then tell her which faction that she is supposed to belong to in terms of aptitude. She watches as each of the factions line up, and Dauntless is the last to arrive, and she sees, like, oh, they're so badass, and they, like, jump out of a plane and, like, parachute down as part of, like, a training exercise, and then line up, and she's like, and they've got, like, tattoos and whatnot, and she's like, that looks like so much fun. Like, it looks like they really get to do adventure. But she's sort of, like, stuck in Abnegation, where they do, like, a lot of charity work, and she's like, it's very boring. Like, I understand why it's important, but it's very boring. So in the test, Beatrice undergoes, the person giving her the test is part of Abnegation because they're part of government. So she wakes up and the official is, like, freaked out, and she's like, what's going on? And the official's like, it should say that you belong to, like, one of the factions, but instead I'm getting that, like, you would do well in any of the factions. And she's like, well, what do you mean? And they're like, well, the test is supposed to, like, read out one that your aptitude would be for, right? But instead I'm getting that like, the aptitude would be all of them. Like, everybody sort of has a little bit of all of them in them, but one should come out strongest, but yours isn't really coming out strongest. So she's like, okay, but, like, what does that mean? And she's like, the test is, like, there should be, like, one definitive answer, and I'm not finding that with you, so, and I think I need to report this. And Beatrice is like, well, is this normal? Like, couldn't you just put down, like, one of them? And the official's like, well, no. And so Beatrice, because she understands how Abnegation works and that they need to be selfless, is like, well, I'm asking you to be selfless for me and put down any one of them and not to tell anyone. Like, be selfless. And so the official is like, okay, and puts in that Beatrice got Abnegation.
Okay.
So the next day, they're at the ceremony, and here the children are going to be considered part of the faction that they've been given by the test, and there is an opportunity to change factions, but it's frowned upon. You're not supposed to do it. The test that you're given should tell you, like, what you're supposed to be a part of, and then you do it. So at the ceremony, Beatrice's older brother Caleb is given, he's, like, told that he was given the faction erudite, and so he's like, I'm leaving, and so they're like, oh man, and they say goodbye to him, but they're like, you know, this is what the aptitude test says. And it also says that Beatrice was given Abnegation, but Beatrice raises her hand and says, no, I want to do Dauntless. And, like, her parents and everyone are like, what? That's not what the test said. Like, that's crazy. Like, we were told you were given Abnegation and you should stay there. So Beatrice is then taken away into a room where there's 5 leaders: Marcus, Janine, Max, Jack, and Joanna. Each of these are the leaders of, and from the book, I looked it up. Each of these are from the leaders of the 5 factions. They all begin to question Beatrice on why she wants to switch, and if she should even be allowed. And this is like hasn't happened in a long time. And so they argue amongst themselves. And Janine wants to see the data, so she sees like all the data, and she's like, the test did say abnegation was the strongest, but like there are other ones here too. But she's like, that's what the official put down, so that's what it is. She argues with Marcus the most of all, and that his faction is like the least valuable for the city. But Candor is like, whoa, like we're not having this argument here right now. Like Candor is Jack. We're not having this argument here right now. But Janine is like, if we had erudite, we're the smartest, we would lace West resources on things like that. Like this is all about value. And so Beatrice is like, well, what if I become factionless? Like if they can't decide. But then the leaders are finally like, no, we need to decide on this. Like we're not having a big argument right here. We need to decide on here what's going on with Beatrice. And so she's allowed to become Dauntless if she chooses. They ask her again, and she's like, yes. So Beatrice like starts her Dauntless training. She's trained under Four and Eric. But her initial thoughts of how cool Dauntless are is wrong. Is just because she was so used to seeing them from like her view as abnegation, where nothing cool like important happens. So the Dauntless are only allowed to get tattoos and do what they want when they're done training, and they're officially Dauntless. So Beatrice is like the only Dauntless who's like transferred. Like there's no the only Dauntless who chose to be there. The others have like transferred because that's what the test gave them, and so they're all like trying. But she's sort of like already singled out. And so she notices like the training is basically like rigid. It controls every part of their daily lives. And although it's like weirded out because Four seems to have this weird way of acting around her. He like pushes her harder than the others, but is also sometimes weirdly kind. But he's like watching her all the time. She's like, it's weird. She also notices that Janine spends a lot of time visiting the Dauntless and talking with Max and the other leaders. So what Beatrice notices in that time is she's getting stronger and faster, but she can't get used to combat. In abnegation, like any kind of violence was always frowned upon, and so she's unused to it. And like there are others from abnegation, but it's uncommon for abnegation to go to Dauntless. And they were already like bigger kind of people, and she's like this small person, and so she doesn't have the strength to overwhelm her opponents. So she keeps losing at combat, but it's also not ruthless.
Yeah,
because that's dumb. Like nobody's being cut. Because that's dumb.
Yeah.
So she begins to push herself harder. She gets up earlier to like practice and work harder, which Eric doesn't like because he's like, that's not part of the approved schedule. Like you shouldn't deviate from the schedule. But Four like sees her and begins to show her like how to fight based on her size. And so he's like, these are like more advanced techniques. I use them all the time, but like you need them because you don't have the strength, your size. So it's more about using like your opponent's weight against them, those kinds of moves. Because the way I see them showing Beatrice fight in the movie, I was like, there's no way Beatrice would win. She's way too small. You have to you don't teach women to fight in combat the same way you do men if they're that small, because it doesn't work. So Beatrice hears rumors that apparently those in abnegation are corrupt and are mishandling the distribution of resources, and she's like, I find that hard to believe. But the other recruits like and that they meet, and some of them that are from Dauntless, are not surprised. They're like, yeah, we've always kind of heard like abnegation has like some corruption issues. And she's like, that's weird, like we're supposed to be selfless. So one day Janine and Max show up and tell the recruits that in training, if they're not up to standards in terms of their value and usefulness to the city and the state, that and to Dauntless standards, that they will be cut and become factionless. So Beatrice is frightened because she's like, I'm good at a lot of the things we do here, but I'm not good at the hand-to-hand combat or at like shooting guns because I've just never done that stuff before. It's hard for me to like do the violent kinds of things. But she is like smart and tactical. But like Four is absolutely livid. He's like so angry that he's like, why are we, these are people who are giving their lives, some of which who have volunteered, but the test told us that we were supposed to be here, and now they're cutting us. Yeah. Right? And he's livid. He's like, how can the city dispose of people so easily? So Beatrice Beatrice is asked by the other recruits like what the factionless are like, because many of them haven't seen them, but because she's from abnegation, she spent some time with them. She says a lot of them seem to just be like lost. They don't really do anything. They don't have value, so they don't do anything. They don't have a purpose. So they kind of just seem sad, but that's what they get for having no value. to the city. She also, this is all through flashback, she does remember that one of them had a tattoo, the factionless, and the only faction that's allowed to get tattoos is Dauntless. But one of the people, and you're only allowed to get a tattoo once you pass the test, not even when you're like a recruit, once you are in Dauntless. But she's like, one of them had a tattoo, like she remembers, but she keeps this to herself because she's like, what the heck does that mean? So Beatrice manages to get into Dauntless, but she's not like the best, but she does prove her usefulness to the city and the state, and so she can stay. Now the recruits are part of the actual Dauntless and can like integrate back in with the rest of the Dauntless team. And what Beatrice finds out is that the Erudite have been like basically saying like, here's information to the Dauntless about what Abnegation have been doing and their corruption, like in terms of like the evidence. And Beatrice goes to her brother in Erudite and is like, hey, do you know what's going on? Like, why are they saying this information? Like, I never saw anything like that. Neither did you. And he's like, look, we deal with facts, right? We deal with truth. We deal with science. So if this is what they say is going on, it must be what's going on. So after all this questioning, Beatrice finds herself in front of Janine, who basically is like, Beatrice, like, I've seen you, like, you've already caused trouble when you went against what the test said. You you chose to be in Dauntless, right? I'm Erudite. Your value to the city is not questioning and research, it's protecting. So make sure you're valuable to the city, and basically threatens her this way. So in there's the one final test before they get to like go out into the field, and it's overcoming their fear. And so Beatrice takes this like fear serum, but she like solves it in an unorthodox way. And there's a rumor going around that because she like chose to be in Dauntless, that she like overcame the test in a different way, and she might be divergent. And she's like, I don't know what that means or what that is. But the official said that like I could be divergent, and that might mean like I don't belong to any faction. So she's like, am I factionless now? Like, what does that mean? So then she finds Four and shares this with him, and tells him why she's so upset. And Four shares, he's like, actually, I chose to leave Abnegation as well. That's why I was like watching you. That's why I was like pushing you harder, because I knew you could do it. But I had done it before, like a couple of years ago, and I also. They called me Divergent as well, but I don't know what it means.
Yeah.
So that night, all of the Dauntless are told to basically mobilize, and they begin taking over the Abnegation faction, but none of them are mind controlled. They just do it because this is what they've been told. Like, this is how Erudite disseminated propaganda in Abnegation through the use of like their position as like the knowledge havers. So they believe that they're like, oh, well, if we get rid of Abnegation, there'll be more resources for more of the other four factions, and Erudite can take over in terms of government. Things will be more efficient, and something that has less value will be removed from the city-state. So Beatrice is alarmed by what she sees. She's like, well, this is not... Like, I signed up to protect people, not to attack them. So she seeks out Four. The two of them rebel and are able to escape and lead a group of Abnegation to, like, a safe space. But in the process, Four is captured. So now in order to stop the assault, they're like, we have to get into Dauntless and either like get the leaders to refuse. And because they have like both Beatrice's parents and Marcus and Caleb is also there, like, so they're like, we have the leaders of, we can talk this through, we can bring them to Dauntless. So Beatrice is like, I can bring you to Dauntless. And yeah, so in this process, Beatrice's mother and father can die, and I think we can actually show how Beatrice was wrong about what the Dauntless, being a Dauntless is. And we show this like through her own, like, we've already seen like the romanticism disappear, but now we see like she has to kill people that she knew, and she's seeing her parents die, and this is the cost of war. And this cost of war was simply because Erudite wanted to take control. So like, this is a pointless war where innocents are being harmed. And that's the role that a military plays for other factions. They're a tool. Yeah. So the same ending plays out where like she goes to find Janine, and she's like, you need to like stop the order. But it turns out that Marcus is actually corrupt. Like the leader of the Abnegation, he was actually doing some corrupt things. And Janine basically says like, all leaders are corrupt to some extent. We just use that as a means of like extrapolating and then using that information to control the Dauntless to overthrow the Abnegation, because we needed an army. We also didn't like refute you joining the Dauntless because we knew we needed a bigger army. So we've been like actually controlling the aptitude tests to tell people what they should pick. And it's not based off of your aptitude. It's based off of what we, the erudite, wanted people to be in. And so normally they put the most amount of people in Amity, but they've started putting more and more people into Dauntless because they wanted to create a bigger army. And there's no such thing as aptitude. It's all been a lie. It's all been a way to control how many people function within the society. And those who rebel were just moved to the faction list and not allowed to like live off of the functioning unity and conformity of the city-state. But she's like, but now we have like this new thing. We're going to use the fear serum and try something different on. And so she shows 4, and 4 is being controlled by the fear serum. So he's not. It's not like a mind control thing. He literally just thinks he's afraid of any stimuli that comes at him. So he's like at a heightened state of stress. So he like will fight anyone because he thinks he's afraid of them. And so he's like fighting with Beatrice because she's the only one that's around. They've like set it up that way, but he's not being mind controlled per se. Yeah, and so she does the same thing and like breaks him out of it because like the thing he's afraid of most is killing Beatrice. And so she turns the gun on herself and she like stops him because I thought that was actually pretty cool.
Yeah.
So I was like, oh, that's neat. Like the thing he fears the most is hurting somebody who's innocent. And Beatrice is like, but I don't think I'm innocent. And he's like, no, you did what you had to do. Because she's killed now. So in the end, Janine, like, she's like, tries to stop, Beatrice tries to stop Janine. And she's like, you have to take back the order. And Janine's like, no, I'm not stopping the order. And so they like incapacitate Janine, but Beatrice and 4 are basically helpless as they watch all of like the remaining members of Dauntless. So not their little group of people who escaped, but like all the members of the Dauntless faction basically commit genocide on abnegation, and they're forced to watch on a screen as all of this happens. And that's the end.
That's super dark.
Yeah. But I really wanted to play in like, this is what happens when you try to take over. Like, this is what happens when you create war. You know, there are always casualties of innocence, and there are always people like being part of the Dauntless means you're a tool.
Yeah.
Right. And I don't mean a tool as in like, oh, you're a tool. I mean like you are part of the proletariat that gets used in an uprising for a coup d'etat. There will be people. And also that I also like the idea that aptitude was not a thing. I also would have, if I had more time, I would have put something in there about Janine being like, oh, you're divergent.
Yeah.
Like at the end being like, oh, you're divergent. But nobody knows what that means. They're just like, it means you don't conform to the rules. Like, even though the aptitude test doesn't work, like, you don't conform. Something about you is different. And I'm going to save what that is for my sequels. Ooh. Yeah.
Ooh.
Yeah. So I'm really trying to play with this whole idea of like, what does it mean to be part of the state and have value to the state? That's why everything was like, what's your value to the city state? What's your value to the city state? You get cut. The factionless have no value to the city state, right? Yeah.
And I was more like, all right, you are non-conforming, but how do you like make yourself conform?
Oh, I'm excited.
But then also like super non-conforming.
Yeah, I'm excited to see how this is going to play out in the future. We've got 2 more movies, and then because there was no 4th movie made, we'll have freedom in the end. So that's at least, think about that, the light at the end of the tunnel. That freedom on the 4th.
That'll be nice, having all that freedom for the last episode. So.
That'll be really neat. And maybe you should brush up on the last book. Maybe we should brush up on the last book just to be sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Probably.
That's probably a good idea. Any last minute thoughts about the first Divergent movie?
No.
No? Yeah.
No.
It was all right. It was great.
It was okay.
Yeah.
I like that it used a little bit of like psychology. Like I felt like I could comfortably talk about these things.
Yeah. Cool. Where can people find you?
You can find me on Twitch, .tv/AlyssaLou, ALYSSALOOO, or on Instagram at Alyssa Rose Handmade.
You can find our dope band Robot Philosopher anywhere you listen to dope music and right here on YouTube. You can also find CineMasters and all the content we produce right here, including our brand new series called The Long and the Short of It, which is awesome reviews by Justin. You can find more podcasts like this one, and you can find our video essay series called This Is a Thing. Please be sure to stay tuned for the next episode in our CineMasters series, which will be on the sequel to this one, which will be coming out in like a whole series. So yeah, we'll see you then. Peace out.
Goodbye.